People think money solves everything. It doesn't. You could have 10 million a private jet and your name in the newspapers, and life will still find a way to kick you in the teeth. That's the iron rule of existence. Everybody struggles. Not just the unlucky, not just the foolish. Everybody. I buried a child. That wasn't in any plan. No amount of wealth could buy my way out of that fate. In the 1950s, childhood leukemia killed 100% of its victims. My son Teddy was one of them. I cried every day. But crying didn't change the odds. It didn't bring him back. The only thing left was to keep moving forward. That's what I call soldiering through. You don't have to like it, you just have to do it. Civilization, as I see it, is built by generations of people soldiering through. Think about it. Medicine didn't cure leukemia overnight. It took decades of research, billions of dollars, thousands of failed attempts. Now, in the 21st century, the cure rate is above 90%. That doesn't make me whole again. But it does mean the next father who gets that diagnosis has a fighting chance. That's what progress looks like. And progress isn't free. It's built on the tears of people who endured pain they couldn't fix. That's how civilization advances, by absorbing blows and refusing to quit. So when someone looks at me and says, "Charlie, you've had such a fortunate life, so much wealth, so much opportunity," I don't deny it. I've been lucky beyond reason. But I've also been knocked flat like everybody else. That's the paradox people don't understand. Success doesn't immunize you from pain. It just gives you better shoes to wear while you walk through it. The point is not to expect a life free of suffering. That's childish fantasy. The point is to accept that suffering is part of the package deal, and the only reasonable response is to endure it. If you have to cry for 2 hours a day, cry. But don't give. That's what I've seen over and over again in business and in life. The winners aren't spared hardship. They simply outlast it. The losers make the same mistake. They let pain turn into paralysis. I'll put it bluntly. If you think you can live without hardship, you're delusional. If you think you can win without endurance, you're doomed. The smartest men I knew in my youth didn't all become successful. Some of them fell apart at the first personal tragedy, the first business failure, the first market crash. Intellect didn't save them. Wealth didn't save them. Nothing saves you except discipline, resilience, and the simple ability to keep walking. I like the way the Stoics put it. Not the sugar-coated nonsense you see on coffee mugs today, but the original brutal wisdom. You can't control fate, only your response. And the correct response is, don't quit. You soldier through. That's what my generation did through the Great Depression. It wasn't heroic. It was necessary. You couldn't whine because nobody cared. You couldn't stop because you'd starve. So you soldered through. That's why I laugh when modern people talk about unprecedented difficulty. Well, unprecedented really. Try burying a child when the cure rate is 0. Try living through 1932 with no job, no welfare, and no safety net. Today's difficulties are real, but they're not new. What's new is people thinking they deserve to be spared. I don't admire complainers. You admire survivor. And the truth is, you don't need genius to survive. You need grit. The willingness to endure boredom, setbacks, heartbreak, and keep showing up anyway. That's why I say the iron rule is everybody struggles. It's not optional. The only variable is how you handle it. You can collapse or you can soldier through. One of those paths leads nowhere. The other leads forward, even if it's through hell. And if you're lucky, your endurance contributes to something bigger. Your personal suffering becomes the foundation for progress. Like the generations who endured until science cured the diseases that killed their children. That's why, in spite of everything, I still like civilization. It's flawed, it's messy, it's unfair. But it's also proof that human beings can take a beating, keep walking, and leave the world a little better for the next round. So remember this. You will suffer. Don't whine. Don't quit. Soldier through, because that's the only option you've got. And oddly enough, it's good enough. Most people go through life assuming struggle is some kind of detour. It isn't. It's the main road. Your health fails. Your marriage hits rough patches. Your children disappoint you. Your friends betray you. That's life. It's not a tragedy that these things happen. It's a tragedy if you expect them not to. I learned early that you can't build your life around the fantasy of safety. You'll never be insulated enough. Ask the rich. They still get cancer. Their kids still die in accidents. Their spouses still get dementia. The money softens the mattress, but it doesn't stop the nightmares. So what do? You accept pain as the default setting, not because you like it, nobody likes it, but because resistance is stupid. Take my own life. People see the headlines, Berkshire Hathaway billions, all the success, but they don't see the long nights of sorrow, the losses, the mistakes that nearly broke me. I lost my first marriage, that was no accident. It was a failure, and I take my share of the blame. I went through years of being broke when I wasn't sure if I'd ever get back on my feet, and, of course, the loss of a child. Nothing else compares to that. I didn't escape any of it. I endured it. That's the point. Endurance is underrated. People worship talent. They drool over genius. But what they should admire is resilience, because talent without resilience collapses at the first blow. The market is the same way. It doesn't spare anyone. I've seen geniuses lose everything because they couldn't handle a rough patch. They thought every downturn was an insult to their intelligence instead of the iron rule of capitalism. Let me tell you something blunt. If you can't take a punch, you shouldn't get in the ring. That applies to investing. That applies to marriage. That applies to life. And when you do get hit, and you will, don't waste time whining. I don't admire the people who never got punched. They don't exist. I admire the ones who got punched and didn't stay down. Look at the history of civilization. It's a parade of disasters, plagues, wars, depressions, failures, and yet here we are. Not because anybody avoided pain, but because they kept soldiering through it. When I was a boy, polio crippled thousands every summer. Parents lived in terror. Now it's almost eradicated. How? By generations enduring the suffering until science found a way to stop it. That's what I mean when I say, progress is worth watching. Your job isn't to avoid hardship. It's impossible. Your job is to build the character to withstand it. And if you can contribute to the kind of progress that makes it a little easier for the next generation. People ask me, Charlie, how do you stay so calm? The answer is, what's the alternative? Screaming at fate, bargaining with the universe. It's childish. The mature response is to tighten your jaw, accept reality, and keep moving forward. You can cry, you can curse, but you can't kit. And if you think this philosophy sounds harsh, ask yourself, what's the other option? To collapse, to give up. That's not a strategy. It's surrender. The winners in life, the ones who endure, aren't spared pain. They're simply stubborn enough to keep walking. That's all. So here's the hard truth. Pain is not the exception. It's the rule. Stop expecting otherwise. It'll make you seer, tougher, and ironically, happier. Because once you stop fighting reality, you can focus on dealing with it. And that's when you discover something surprising. You can handle more than you think. If you think life is cruel, wait until you meet the stock market. It's a machine designed to humble you. Markets don't care about your education, your confidence, or your brilliant theory. They exist to test your endurance. And if you can't soldier through the downturns, you won't survive. I've seen fortunists vanish overnight. 1929, 1973, 1987, 2008. Pick your crash. They all did the same thing. Ripped the guts out of anyone who was overconfident, over-leveraged, or simply too weak to hold on. I don't care how smart you are. If you panic at the bottom, you're finished. The market punishes impatience more than ignorance. When Warren and I were running Berkshire, we didn't escape mistakes. We made plenty. We bought lousy textile mills, second-rate shoe businesses, and newspaper companies that went extinct faster than anyone predicted. We lived through the pain of watching them bleed. Did we enjoy it? Of course not. But we endured it. We learned. We soldiered through. And here's the secret. Most of investing success isn't brilliance. It's survival. Surviving the mistakes, surviving the drawdowns, surviving your own stupidity. Everyone wants the magic formula. The truth is boring. Stay sane longer than most people. Avoid debt, avoid envy, avoid arrogance. And when you screw up, and you will, don't quit. I've watched young investors blow up because they couldn't tolerate embarrassment. One bad trade, one downturn, and they walked away. That's not discipline. That's fragility. Markets don't require genius. They require patience. If you can soldier through 5 recessions without doing something stupid, you'll likely end up rich. If you demand comfort, you'll end up broke. That's another iron rule. Money flows from the impatient to the patient, from the fragile to the resilient. When I say soldier through, I'm not romanticizing pain. I'm telling you the only practical way to win. Take 1973. The market fell almost 50%. Companies were cheap. Panic was everywhere. If you could endure that misery, if you didn't sell in despair, you came out years later far wealthier. But most people couldn't do it. They confused temporary pain with permanent loss. They fled at the worst possible moment. They lacked the one trait that mattered: endurance. That's what I mean when I say pain isn't an exception. It's baked into the system. Civilization advanced because people endured hardship, and portfolios grow for the same reason, because investors endure volatility. No one avoids the blows. The trick is not to avoid them, but to outlast them. People love to ask, what's the secret to Berkshire's success? It wasn't genius. It wasn't timing. It was the discipline to endure when others folded, to sit through years of boredom, years of ridicule, years of losses, and still keep going. If you can do that, you'll do fine. If you can't, no clever strategy will save you. So, don't just prepare for pain. Expect it. When the market drops 40%, don't act shocked. Act like someone who knew it was always part of the deal. 'Cause if you soldier through, you'll live to see the rebound. And if you don't, you'll be one of the countless names history forgets. That's the truth. The market isn't your biggest enemy. Neither is inflation or recessions or politicians. Your biggest enemy lives inside your own skull. Fear, envy, ego. Those are the killers. I've said it for decades. Envy is the stupidest sin. Why? Because it's the only one where you don't even get to have fun. At least gluttony gives you a good meal. Lust gives you a good night. Envy just gives you misery. And yet it drives most of the world. People can't stand to see their neighbor a little richer, a little happier, a little luckier. So they chase dumb risks, buy overpriced garbage, and end up poorer for it. I've watched envy wipe out fortunes faster than bad luck ever could. A man who is perfectly content with his returns suddenly feels cheated because his brother-in-law doubled his money in some crazy bubble. Next thing you know, he's bankrupt. Ego is just as dangerous. Smart people especially. They think they're too clever to fail. But the market doesn't reward clever. It rewards discipline. I've seen plenty of geniuses blow up because they couldn't admit a mistake. They rode bad ideas straight into the ground because their ego refused to let go. I call that a stupidity tax. Fear, of course, is universal. The market falls, the news screams doom, and suddenly rational adults behave like children. They dump assets at the exact moment they should be buying. Why? Because fear hijacks reason. That's why I keep hammering the same point. Your temperament matters more than your IQ. If you can't control envy, ego, and fear, your intelligence won't save you. Warren and I made it through decades of markets, not because we were smarter than everyone else, but because we were less stupid. We kept our emotions in check while others lost their heads. Think of it like a poker game. The winners aren't the flashiest players. They're the ones who fold when they should, sit quietly for hours, and don't go on tilt when they lose a hand. That's temperament. Most people can't do it. They can't stand boredom. They can't stand being outshined. They can't stand the idea that wealth is built slowly, not in a rush. So they sabotage themselves. The irony is that conquering envy, ego, and fear doesn't make you superhuman. It just makes you average in a world where most people are self-destructive. And in markets, being average in temperament makes you a top D-cell performer. So when I talk about soldiering through, I don't just mean enduring external pain, losing money, facing tragedy, living through recessions. I mean soldiering through your own worst impulses. 'Cause if you can outlast yourself, you can outlast anything. It's not glamorous advice. It doesn't sell books, but it works. And here's the cruel truth. If you don't master your inner enemies, the world doesn't need to beat you. You'll do it yourself. That's why envy is dumb, ego is dangerous, and fear is fatal. Soldier through those, and you'll survive almost anything. If you want proof of what envy, ego, and fear can do, you don't have to look far. Just open a history book or the business pages from almost any decade. Start with the dot bubble in the late 1990s. Every cab driver in America was giving stock tips. Companies with no revenue, no profits, sometimes no products, were valued in the billions. Why did people pour money into them? Envy. They saw their neighbor double his net worth in 6 months and couldn't stand being left behind. So, they chased. And when the bubble burst in 2000, trillions evaporated. Ego played its part too. I watched supposedly brilliant managers convince themselves the rules had changed. That old concepts like profit, cash flow, or business models didn't matter anymore. That arrogance cost investors fortunes, and fear cleaned up what envy and ego started. The same people who bought garbage at the top sold good businesses at the bottom. They couldn't stand the pain, so they locked in their losses. Fast forward to 2008, the housing bubble. People convinced themselves that home prices could never fall. Ego again believing in a fantasy that defied basic math. Banks leveraged themselves 30-1, betting on mortgage securities they didn't understand. That wasn't intelligence, it was collective insanity. And when the music stopped, fear set in. Banks collapsed, investors panicked, and the whole system nearly went with it. Look at cryptomania more recently. People throwing billions at dog coins and digital tulips. Envy at the neighbor who bragged about turning $1,000 into $1 million. Ego from kids who thought they reinvented finance. Fear when prices collapsed, and suddenly everybody wanted out at once. History doesn't change. The costumes do, but the characters stay the same. Envy, ego, fear, over and over again. And the graveyard keeps filling. You'd think people would learn. They don't. They can't. Human nature is remarkably stubborn. That's why I say the iron rule is universal. Everybody struggles. But the foolish make it worse by struggling against their own stupidity. The difference between Warren and me and the poor souls who blew up in those mania isn't intelligence, it's temperament. We weren't immune to envy, ego, or fear. We just managed to soldier through them. When tech stocks went to the moon in 1999, we looked like idiots for not joining the party. People said we were old-fashioned, washed up, too cautious. We didn't care. We stayed the course. 2 years later, most of those critics were broke. When housing went wild in 2006, everybody thought they were a real estate genius. We didn't join them. We'd seen bubbles before. We knew the ending. When the crash came, we had cash. They had tears. That's the real secret. Not avoiding pain, it's possible, but refusing to amplify it with stupidity. Markets will wound you. Life will wound you. Don't make it worse by stabbing yourself with envy, ego, and fear. The graveyard is full of people who thought they were smarter than the rules. They weren't. Soldier through the mania. Soldier through the crash. That's how you survive. That's how you get rich. Not in the exciting moments, but in the boring discipline in between. And if you think you're too clever to fall for the same traps, congratulations. That's your ego talking. And we both know how that story ends. People imagine Warren and I sat in Omaha making nothing but brilliant decisions for 50 years. That's a myth. We made plenty of dumb ones. Take Berkshire Hathaway itself. It started as a dying textile mill. We thought we could turn it around. We were wrong. Textiles were already moving overseas. Costs were crushing. Competition was brutal. We wasted years trying to save a business that had no future. If we'd put that capital into Coca-Cola or American Express sooner, we'd have been twice as rich. But we didn't quit the game just because we started with a mistake. We soldiered through. We turned Berkshire into a holding company and used it as a platform to buy better businesses. That's survival. Or look at the shoe business we bought in the 1990s. Dexter shoes seemed like a good idea at the time. Strong brand, solid market. Then foreign competition crushed it. We lost hundreds of millions. Worse, we paid for it in Berkshire stock. If we just lit the money on fire, it would have been less painful. That stock we issued would be worth tens of billions today. It was one of the dumbest deals of our careers. But here's the key. We admitted it, we learned from it, and we kept going. Contrast that with most executives. They make a mistake, and then double down to protect their ego. That's how companies go bankrupt. We prefer to take our pain early and move on. You can't undo a bad deal. You can only refuse to repeat it. Another example, newspapers. We thought local papers had a durable moat, strong community presence, captive advertisers. For a while, it was true. Then the internet arrived. Our moat turned into a puddle. We underestimated how fast the economics would collapse. That mistake cost us too. Did it ruin us? No. Because we never bet the farm on any one idea. We always kept enough resilience to absorb mistakes. That's a principle most investors don't understand. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to avoid being destroyed. Our record looks impressive because the successes outweighed the failures by a mile. But don't kid yourself. There were failures, painful ones that made us look like idiots. What mattered wasn't avoiding mistakes. It was soldiering through them, learning, adapting, and living to fight another day. You see, investing is a game of endurance.